We are live at YouTube now, and here I'm broadcasting it.
Can you give me the link so I can tweet it?
I'll text you, ma'am.
Put it to that common group that we have. We'll send it to everybody.
Yeah.
At the count of three. 1, 2, 3.
On behalf of the Mansarovar Global University, I welcome all the panelists and the participants. Today's webinar on the impact of COVID-19 on the progress of research in life sciences, mitigation of losses, and the way forward has been jointly organized by the Mansarovar Global University and the National Academy of Sciences, India. We have with us a panel of eminent scholars who have long experience of teaching and research. I would like to introduce our honorable panelists, Professor R.S. Dubey, who is presently Vice Chancellor of the Central University of Gujarat. And before joining Gujarat Central University, he was Vice Chancellor in the T.M. Bhagalpur University in Bihar, and also before that he was Vice Chancellor in the Guru Ghasidas University, Bilaspur. Though Professor Dubey is a professor in the Banaras Hindu University in the Department of Biochemistry, and he has long experience of teaching and research and administration. We welcome Professor Dubey in this webinar. We have with us Professor M.S. Sheshai, who is Professor of Crop Physiology in the University of Agriculture University in Bangalore, GKVK. And Professor Sheshai is well known for his work on the molecular breeding, especially nowadays he is working on the improving rice varieties in relation to water stress and many other aspects. We have with us Professor Urmi Chatterjee from Department of Zoology, University of Calcutta. She has established a very strong school of cancer biology, working on the human cancer cells, and of course, trying to develop some prescriptions and medicines for the treatment of cancer using even the Indian many medicines being used by the tribal populations and local people. We have with us Professor Arun Jagannath, who is Professor of Botany in University of Delhi, and his area of research is mainly he's trying to improve the crops like mustard and safflower using the transgenic technique in the area of genomics and genetics. And we have with us Dr. Vinita Gora, who is Associate Professor at the ISER Bhopal. And she is well known for her researches in the field of systematics, ecology, conservation, pollination biology, and many more. Before I invite our panelists, I would like to say that the COVID-19 has completely shattered our life throughout the world. In fact, in the past few months, our lives have changed so much that it is, as far as our teaching or research is concerned, and also related with our studies, work, research, and also our relation with our friends, family members, and also with the wider community. What we have seen that there is a great impact of COVID-19, especially on higher education. there are many issues related with the higher education, especially teaching and learning. We know that many of the institutions are closed and many labs are still closed. Some labs they're open, but of course, we all know that our research, especially whether it is a wet lab or the field studies, it is already greatly affected. When we talk of the wet lab, many of our scientists and researchers during the lockdown period, they were not able to go to their labs, and the cultures or the plants in their greenhouses or glass houses are also in the field, that nobody was there to take care of even the harvesting and even the crop, if crop is matured. Of course, as far as field studies are concerned, many students and teachers and researchers, they plan field studies well in advance. And of course, because of the COVID-19 lockdown, they are not able to go to the field. And especially those who are working in the field of taxonomy, working in the field of ecology, or even conservation, their work is definitely affected by the COVID-19. So there are many issues related with research, especially because today's topic is mainly what are the losses because of the COVID-19 and how we can mitigate the losses, and in future, what is the way forward? If such type of pandemic is there in future, what precautions researchers should take? So before I now invite, I will not go into the details of the pandemic. Everyone knows about the problems. I would invite our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor R.S. Dubey, to share his experience, because everyone in the panel, they have a lot of experience as far as research is concerned and in the life sciences. And we would like to know more about Professor Dubey, because he has a functional lab at BHU. They are working on the metal toxicity or soil salinity and many other aspects related with plant biochemistry. So now I invite Professor R.S. Dubey to share his experience as a researcher and also as an administrator. Professor Dubey.
Thank you, Professor Pandey. First of all, I would like to congratulate you for organizing this webinar, because it has provided a nice opportunity for all of us to ponder over this situation, that what COVID-19 has made us as far as life sciences research is concerned. We all know that in the month of March, there was sudden lockdown announced on 25th March, and all the hostel inmates which were staying in the hostels across the universities, different research institutions, they had to vacate the hostels, and many of the laboratories, rather most of the laboratories, they were shut down at that moment of time. And for months together, we have been facing that situation. So especially in life sciences, it is not possible to lock down biological organisms or biological substances. Maybe if there are chemicals, room temperature chemicals, you can place them somewhere like that. But when it comes to experiments related to the life sciences, the situation has become very difficult. If we just recall at that time, at the time of the lockdown, many of the research scholars who had recently joined as the PhD students and they had worked for maybe 6 months, 1 year, or like that. So they will have to work afresh, because many of the experimental protocols, they have standardized, many of the things they lost in between. Related to many of the cultures like bacterial cultures, many of the cell lines, that cell lines also to preserve very difficult situation because all research institutions, all laboratories, all universities, they do not have that cryogenic facilities and others to store cell lines. And that also, if there are established cell lines, can be stored. If they are at primary stage, primary cell lines or cultures, they require a specific environmental conditions, a specific temperatures, a regular cultures that they require. So it was not possible. So many expensive cell lines were spoiled and some have been kept, but still we do not know because for many months together, we know the electricity problem also, it's very erratic in many universities. So even if the cell lines or substances or even the biochemicals have been kept in deep freezes, we do not know what will be the condition after 3 to 4 months. So that has been a very critical situation there also. And similarly, for experimental animals also, those who are working with mice and other animals, the animals need that at least daily they need to be looked after, at least weekly they need to be looked after. But with the sudden closure, the lab attendants also had to go home. All teachers are also, they are working from home. And in certain cases, situation become like this that nobody was allowed to enter in university campuses. So for many days, complete laboratories were closed down. So various kinds of problems have come up, and especially our youngsters, young teachers, and young research scholars who are at the earliest stage, they have suffered quite a lot in that. And especially those who are doing experiments, for example, with genetic engineering, that is the transgenics, so after many years, maybe after 1 year, 1.5 years, they have come up to that stage. And now those organisms, those substances cannot be kept in that stage, even if we go for liquid nitrogen or other things, there has to be disruption somewhere or the other, and this will lead to complete loss of year together or many months together. Similarly, for research projects, the time-bound research projects which have been provided by the various funding agencies, they will definitely, look for the results, the deliverables within the time frame. But the research scholars, they have gone to their home and they are being paid according to the norms. They are to be paid because even the contractual employees are to be paid. Whoever is working from home is to be paid. So during this period of time, when research scholars are not working, teachers are not working, so how it will be possible that within the limited time frame, the deliverables we can come to the results? So that is also a very difficult situation. We have to look into that very carefully and sympathetically. And here I would like to point it out that when lockdown came into existence, that concentration diverted of all the scientists working towards COVID-19 related work. And a lot of fundings were poured into for COVID-19 related work, maybe development of sanitizers, maybe development of personal protective equipments, maybe for, developing newer kits. And many of our laboratories have done very well. Many of the biotech companies have done very well in getting antigen, developing their own indigenous antigen-based kits. Many portable PCRs have come up for testing of these antigens. So many advancements have been made by biotech companies, certain laboratories, and more than 200 research projects have been funded related to COVID-19 work. So those type of works were being allowed in, they were allowed in special circumstances, and many of our laboratories also cooperated for COVID testing. But because that was a peculiar situation, so from humanitarian point of view also, it became our responsibility of the life sciences to cooperate with the hospital authorities, to cooperate in developing kits related to the diagnosis of COVID-19. These all we did. But as far as that life sciences research is concerned, we are very much sure, and everybody will agree that there has been loss of biochemicals by keeping them in deep fridges or such or without use. Maybe various types of enzymes, various types of antibodies which we procured, which were time bound, that after a limited period of time they will be of no use. So a lot of that resource has been put into that. So likewise, so if we just summarize the whole scenario, that it comes to our mind that definitely the research projects which have been funded, those funding agencies should also extend the time limit for the research project, depending on the situation, that how many more months this COVID pandemic still continues, because still it has been 3 to 4 months already, right from the March. It is July. We don't know what will happen. So depending on this, depending on the time, for example, if our laboratories are suffering for 4 to 5 months, so similar, that amount of time should be given by the project funding agencies also, with, of course, with adequate financial support as well. Because our work has been hampered at one point of time, and the second, that the attempt has been made for the last 1 year, 6 months for continuation of the project, that has also gone in vain. So depending on that, the time loss should be compensated, and beyond that, financial assistance also should be provided by the project funding agency. That is one part. And second part, for our research scholars who have been working in the, especially in the life sciences, and after when that's a COVID-19 situation gets normal, so definitely it becomes the duty of that universities, that state universities, central universities, or research institutions to modify our guidelines so that they can be given additional 6 months, 1 year, whatever may be the time for extension for their completion of their PhD work. This should be given, and the financial support also should be provided, because for the life sciences we know that the very expensive biochemicals and other materials we have, even the maintenance of the living organisms, that it's quite expensive, so that is needed. As far as Professor Pandey pointed out, I have been working in plant biochemistry. I'm growing rice in the greenhouse conditions, and similarly, we go for that replication in field conditions also. So those types of experiments cannot be conducted around the year. When we go for the field conditions, there are specific 3 to 4 months time. It starts from this summer period, which we can do it. But the students, scholars couldn't perform those experiments. So that loss of only 2-3 months, it amounts to a loss of complete year, whole year like that. So we have to see that how we are going to compensate for that. That viability of the seeds, viability of other things also are to be looked into. The other day, I was talking to one of my friends at the University of Delhi South Campus working with mycobacterium. He was telling that it's very difficult to maintain the culture of mycobacterium, because that a bacterial cell culture, bacteria can multiply within a day or two, but mycobacterium takes, it is 50 times slower growth compared to the bacteria. So there are many issues. Viability is lost. If cell line varies, then it becomes very difficult to regain, and even if procurement also is quite expensive. So these things are to be looked into. Our research laboratories also need to be funded additionally for that purpose. We have to look for that type of support also. We have to see, because everywhere funding is being provided for the survival. So for survival of our research students also, for survival of our laboratories also, additional funding is needed. So with these few words, just I'd like to close. So I thank you, Professor Pandey, and all panelists for being over here and discussing these issues, very pertinent issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Dubey, for sharing your experiences and also valuable advice to the funding agencies, to the university authorities, that the research scholars need to be taken care, and extension need to be given for them so that they can complete their work. And also the time lapse, especially we all know that the annual crops like rice and others, if 1 year, 1 month or 3 months are gone, then you have to wait for another year. And I think Professor Shishai is facing the same problem because he's working with rice, and I will now invite him to share his experience, because especially when harvesting season is there and there is a complete lockdown, the people may not be available for even harvesting, and the research scholars are gone home, and who will take care of the measurements or the other aspects related with research. So now I invite Professor Shishai to share his experience.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, Professor Pandey. Thank you very much, Dr. Dubey. And nice to be with the panelists. We have had a discussion before as to what we should tell. And I mean, I thought I would do a completely different setup, because there are two aspects in this kind of discussion that we will do. One is, of course, the agriculture in the field, and then agriculture research that happens in the laboratories, such as including my own lab and in the universities and other things. I mean, they always consider one situation. If I want to share my slides, if you can you see this now? I hope you can see the slides that I have shared now.
Yes, we can see.
Yes.
Right. So, I mean, this is a slightly different type of thing that I thought I would tell you. Asking the question whether this COVID situation is not a threat at all for us. I mean, do we have to get terrified by this, or should we all, worry too much about, we're all telling about the funding mechanisms, we are talking about the food and, kind of things like that, and the harvesting that we do in the agriculture fields. But if you look at this whole scenario of 500,000 people dead in the world, and in India is sort of surging ahead, and with I think today it was a little more than 20,000 people detected positive with kind of thing. Therefore, it is indeed a threat. So when we look at this threat, then I, as a biologist, I would like to now address this situation as to how is it that this is impacting life for us in life sciences as such, as well as find out methodology, or how is it that what is it that we should do to go ahead and then face this kind of challenges. So be an optimist, and then if you look at this way, we have two choices. One is we get scared and succumb and like leave it, go back into a shell and suffer more than what the disease can cause. On the other hand, like what any organism would do, evolve a strategy and learn how to thrive and do things better. So, I mean, while tapping this herd immunity, the kind of thing that people are talking about, people are waiting that, we would develop a kind of a herd immunity, and the whole lot of people will get the immunity, and all those kind of things are being said. But I just corrected it in the morning. I had typed the herd as herb. I mean, that would make sense, because the immunity to people, to us, as there is always this talk that the Indians have a little better immunity. That's the reason why the death rate is not as high as it used to be, as it was found in Europe and in America. But then I do not know whether that is really true. But then when I look at this question, as Professor Pandey was mentioning, we work with rice, and we are looking at rice in two ways. One is, as a food, as a staple cereal that we eat in India. And this is one of the biggest, rice is one of the biggest, source of proteins for human diet. Unfortunately, the protein content is very low, and we are trying to now address this issue as to how is it that we can make a rice variety which will have better food, better protein, which can be, which the human beings can have. The reason for that is because immunity develops, our health is only based on food, and therefore things have to be done very differently with respect to agriculture science. So there are three questions that I thought I would ask. And then, I mean, I thought of more of making this as a sort of an informal discussion, and then derive some ideas about this, and then go ahead with some kind of strategic planning towards what research has to be done, and how the teaching should be done. Now, there are three major questions that we have in agriculture as such. One is agriculture production and the produce distribution to people. And then we have higher education in terms of the agriculture education itself is something which has taken a big beating because of this COVID. But then let's be optimistic as to let's do what is it that we can do in it. And one, of course, everybody has already, Professor Dubey and Professor Pandey have already said that agriculture research or any other research, especially the life science research, has really taken a beating here. So what is it that we can do to cope with this? Because in the first slide, I said that there are two things. One is you succumb to get scared and die, or you evolve. So let's evolve. So when we look at the agriculture production, there's a small thing that I want to deviate in terms of differing from what Professor Dubey said in terms of what happens to agriculture productivity. You know, in the villages, there's not much of this kind of a threat like what we have in the cities, such as the migrant workers. And in our state, we are not supposed to call them migrant laborers or migrant workers. We are calling them as guest workers. So they are guests with us, so we have to take care of them. But then the villages, it is not like that most of the time. There are people there. And this time, fortunately, the production was not affected because of the COVID. And then the monsoon this time is not going to be any abnormal things. People predict that there's a normal monsoon. It has already started raining in many places. And agricultural practices have started. But what gets really affected, and that really has an economic repercussion, is how good we are in distributing the produce to the consumers. That's where that is what has taken a real beating. And you can see this kind of number of articles and photographs have been said. Somebody said hunger will kill us before the coronavirus. Hunger is not necessarily because of the lack of production. It is mainly because of lack of distribution. It's availability. People don't have money to buy, or people do not have the produce even if they have the money because it's not transported. I mean, that's what happened when we went to this supermarket. They said it's all over. We are waiting for the produce, the supplies to come. Until then, people have to suffer. But then there is panic. Unfortunately, this is what happens most of the time. People get into a panic mode, and then a whole lot of disasters can take place. Now, what is it that we can do to sort of mitigate this? Is a challenge that we always had. Now, there are several voluntary organizations that came forward, and they try to not sort of help sell the produce for farmers, especially. This is just an example that a lot of such things have happened. A lot of NGOs have done this. And what we did in our university is an alumni association. And they hired trucks, went to the gardens and bought the produce and came back and sold in the cities. This is during the lockdown period. But I would say that this is only a sort of a small drop of help in the ocean of problems. But I think some of those mechanisms, if somebody started, then things could become much better in terms of distribution. But now, of course, things have a little eased up, but then the disease threat is definitely there. But I'm saying that in the absence of the difficulties of lockdown right now, there are other difficulties that we are trying to talk about. One is the farmers themselves are coming and selling. Now, this is where the problem is. The kind of increase in the spread of the disease is mainly because people congregate. In India, I don't know whether in other places it's like that, but then in India, it seems to be that we are sort of congregating and mixing up together. And then there's a lot of spread of this disease, unfortunately, in the cities. And this is something that has to be tackled. And the government is trying to do something in terms of organizing markets where the farmers come and sell. And there is a loudspeaker which makes announcements, please go far behind and, keep distances and all that. But then there are so many people here. While this strategy works well for vegetables, fruits, and such things, but the difficulties are still there for larger kind of products such as the food grains. I mean, how is it that tons of rice grains can be procured and sold like this? How is it that wheat can be distributed to people? When are you going to, plant, like powder them to make them the flour and sell them? These are all the kind of challenges that we have. But of course, the other guys, a lot of people who are trying to now talk about it. I mean, if that happens with respect to the agriculture production and distribution of the produce, the other thing that gets really affected is agriculture education. Now, when we look at this education, I believe that most of the life science activities, if not, agriculture alone, is very highly practical science in the sense we cannot tell anybody that this is how the stomata looks, this is how the chromosome is, and this is how the leaf develops unless we show them exactly what happens. Now, therefore, this COVID situation has made us to teach online, and this is a real problem. I'm really because when we teach the undergraduate students and then the postgraduate students, the challenges are becoming very, very different. Now, when we look at the undergraduates, they're just starting, and I wonder what happens to them in the first and second year. There is not a single practical class was possible. Now, this is a issue. So what we were deciding to do was to develop some kind of an innovative mechanism. I suggested that we should have a brainstorm where we can now plan. For example, if young undergraduate students are there, we tell them, how is it that certain things are growing? How is it that they can make measurements on certain things? With all the kind of facilities in their villages. I'm very sure students can learn all these simple kind of things that are done. Like, for example, in any village, we believe that most of the students that are in the agriculture universities are from villages. They're all in their farmland now, or they have a small backyard. What they should do is we can teach them to now grow some plants, put them some kind of fertilizers or whatever that they get there, and then find out if the plants are doing any better at all, just to sort of sustain that enthusiasm and energy in science. And I believe that this pandemic is not going to last forever. And when it ends, we should not be behind several years with respect to the science progress. So the postgraduate education, which includes MScs or PhDs or even postdoc, and to a certain extent even faculty research that we have been trying to now do these kind of things, is to brainstorm once again to review the kind of program that is being already planned, and then strategically plan certain kind of things. Now, there is a good thing about this lockdown and then all the kind of mechanism that is happening because of the COVID, is there is an opportunity that we can meet all people on earth just like that online. This is an amazing situation. If we can continue this kind of a contact, because Arun Jagannath and I have been talking to each other over telephone or whenever we meet in airports and such things. But now take this button, click it, and then you have each other chatting online, and then we can see each other and we can really plan things. And this is happening across the globe. We have invited faculty from other universities, from abroad to come there free online and then be a part of the seminars, be a part of our teaching. So this can be really global. This is some kind of an opportunity that I thought. But we can, through those discussions, we can review the research programs and plan very strategic kind of progress that is possible to be done. But agriculture research, once again, this is the same thing when I'm talking about. I'm just giving a simple example of how agriculture or the plant science research should help the kind of situation, or whenever something new that comes up and all those kind of things, such as like strategic planning of the programs must be very, very important, in the sense we look at those research programs in two ways. One is the basic science, that all the basic science, in the sense that there is some kind of excitement. I remember once I spoke to somebody in Indian Institute of Science. They said, there's always this conflict that happens. Some people say, hey, agriculture research is not at all science. You guys do something applied, developing a variety. This is something genetics, whatever. But then when we go to the Indian Institute of Science, we blame them and say, you guys do something which is sort of in the test tubes and in the petri plates or whatever. But what is the use for agriculture? What is the use for society and all that? This is a stupid question to ask. I don't want to really get into that, in the sense that each of us, whether the basic science or anything applied, and all the translational research happens because of certain passion that everybody has. But what is amazing now, that is, which is possible now, is a strategic planning which is possible, where the basic science is done with an objective of a long-term goal of translating that into some kind of a tangible product. It could be for health, it could be for food, or it could be for anything that we look at. From life sciences, we have a lot of understandings from the omics sciences, and from all the other kind of lovely things that are happening in the modern biotechnological tools and approaches. So why is it that we cannot now sit together and plan certain experimental mechanisms which can be definitely implemented into the future for developing some kind of programs? Now, there's the reason why I would always look at the situation as an opportunity than a threat at all. So there is, of course, there's a threat. And when there is a group of physicists with whom I work on stable isotopes. So we are all talking about, the government should have done this way, that way. What is the immunity that is there, or what is the kind of vaccine that they should develop? All those kind of things. I don't think we should be worried about that, because as a person, I am not capable of understanding how to develop the vaccine. The medical science people will do it. But given an opportunity now in this kind of situation, what is it that we can do? There's a plenty of things. So therefore, from the plant science or agricultural science point of view, I'm very sure that the immunity that we develop should perhaps be important in terms of both general health. If not COVID, God forbid, if something else comes tomorrow, we should be prepared for all those kind of things. I think we can do a lot of lovely things. I thought we would just sort of initiate these kind of information and then let it out for kind of discussions later on in the panel. Thank you so much for this opportunity, sir. I think this is one of those very important topics, especially when it comes to thinking about how is it that we can mitigate and go forward. And that's an important one. We are not going to stay here. We are not going to go backwards. Certainly, we are going to go forward. And it will be very nice to strategically plan how is it that we can go forward. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I look forward to the discussions and to listening to the other panel members. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Professor Desai, for a wonderful presentation. And especially you have given the idea that for immunity, we should take the proper food. That is one thing very important. And also we have to take care of the farmers and their produce, and how your university has greatly helped in the farmers in that particular area. Thank you very much. Now I invite Professor Urmi Chatterjee for sharing her experience working with the human cell lines, especially in the cancer. And also we know that in West Bengal, Bihar and Odisha, there is problem of arsenic. And she has also been working on those problems. And I would now invite Professor Urmi Chatterjee to share her experience.
Well, good morning. Good morning, all my panelists and everyone who's here today. And I'm really grateful to Professor Pandey and his team for raising such an important issue, because we've all been talking about it and we really didn't know where to go from here. So I will definitely share some very specific issues that we've been having. Probably this is the first time that the entire globe has been united on a certain problem. So it's something that it's not very local. It's something that even USA or Australia or Japan, everyone understands. And so we hope that when decisions or when opinion or like ideas are given, it's going to be a more global solution to a problem, because it's not really very local at this point. Now, sitting in Calcutta University, we do have certain very specific issues. Now, Calcutta University is, we have 8 campuses spread inside the city. And most of our students who come to Calcutta University are some from the city, and many of them travel from suburbs and faraway places. Some of them have been, they like live in hostels, but that's again, a student hostel they cannot accommodate research scholars. So research scholars have to, kind of either hire an apartment or take shelter in PG accommodations. So once pandemic hit, all of them were totally shattered, because most of the PG accommodations refused to keep them. They had to go back home. They couldn't travel because the transport wasn't there. It wasn't safe to travel. Most of the students could not come because some of them even could not access the internet, because some of the places or the remote places where they live in, internet access has not been good. So it's actually been very disruptive. Pandemic has actually been very disruptive. So, and in Calcutta University, we have 2 major aspects. We have the teaching aspect, we have research. So I'm not going to get into the teaching, but the only part of teaching which affects research is many of our PG students, postgraduate students, they have dissertation in their final year. So they usually have to work in a lab for at least 6 months or 1 year, and they gain that experience, which is part of their curriculum. So, most of them, their work got stuck, because it's usually when the semester ends in June, the peak is usually around February, March, April. That's when the peak of their work is. And the entire work got disrupted. So these students, unfortunately, are going to pay the brunt of this probably throughout their lives, because, we cannot hold them. We cannot say that, okay, you continue your MSc for another year, which is not going to happen. So we are going to find out ways and means of, somehow getting out their results and, giving them their degree. But part of their experience is totally hampered. So whenever these students are going to apply to new labs for their research, whether in India, whether abroad, if and when that is going to happen, there will always be a little lapse in their curriculum. So that is something which we are really worried about, and the students are also kind of worried about. Coming to research, we are definitely very affected, because sitting in the zoology department, we have a varied range of research going on. Some which take place in the lab, most of it doesn't, because people who are working on biodiversity, like I have a colleague who works on biodiversity and on pollination, they work with bees, they have to be on the field. There are so many researchers who have to be on the field. So they just cannot sit in the lab, because, they can do their analysis in the lab, but they cannot sit in the lab and simulate the situations for which they have to go to different forests, different ecosystems, and carry out their research. For people like us, where we do cancer research or research with human tissues, we are also extremely affected, because we also work with human tissues. A lot of people, they need blood, they need human blood, like people who are working with, say, cancer or cardiovascular diseases, asthma, malaria, or even arsenic infestations and other human problems. They all need human samples. So that is another point when we are really affected. And people are now also, the research scholars are now also going to be extremely scared about going to hospitals to bring back samples if they get few. Because most of the hospitals have been converted into COVID protection centers. So there's a lot of COVID testing, a lot of people who are coming in mostly with COVID cases. So all the other, unless there is a serious problem, most of the patients are also not being given full priority. So getting tissues, getting samples, that also again becomes a huge problem. So there again, we are facing an obstacle for research. When it comes to cell lines, yes, a lot of our cell lines, I think Professor Dubey mentioned it, a lot of our cell lines are, they've been shelved, and not all have been kept in liquid nitrogen. It wasn't possible for students to go and collect liquid nitrogen and keep them going. So many of the cell lines have been affected. It'll be really a while before we can start procuring these cell lines again and start work. So that is again a huge problem. So I don't know when we shall be able to start work with cell lines. Also, I think people know that there has been an immense cyclone which affected West Bengal. It was one of its kind, not seen in, I guess, many years. So there was a power outage. There were there was load shedding for a very, maybe 48, 72 hours when everything was shut down. So you could very well imagine what's happened to all the kits and the antibodies and the samples and the chemicals and everything that each and every scientist and teacher had procured during the last maybe even 10 years. And, we are really doubtful as to how much of those samples will now be useful, or even the kits and the antibodies, how much of them will actually be working. And to procure all of them, it's not easy to procure so many samples, so many chemicals, because we do it throughout. We've been doing it for many years now. So we have heard some people, really being depressed about starting everything again, which is again not easy, especially not for our students. So that's another issue. Animal, again, is a huge issue. So, I mean, I also have a lot of animal work that we do in the laboratory. Our students, there were one or two scholars who would try to come in even during the lockdown phase and try to feed the animals and all, but unfortunately we could not save all of them. So we lost a lot of animals, which is not only losing resources, the money, everything, experiments which had started had to be ended abruptly. So yes, that, and I mean, they have been talking to different vendors, to breeders, and none of them are sure when they would start delivering animals again. So yes, it's been an obstacle, throughout. However, we all know that necessity is the mother of invention. And I guess a lot of people have tried to bring in COVID research into what they were doing. So there has been effect of COVID on cancer, effect of COVID on mental disorders, effect of COVID on immunological problems. So people have tried to, bring in new research problems, and they have tried to develop new research, which, as Professor Dubey mentioned, have been funded. But but we can't lose our focus also. Like, if there has been focus on other areas, like for example, when we are going to collect arsenic tissues, like we have to go to outskirts, and it's not the best of situations where we can do that. So I mean, but we have to overcome. We do have to overcome. We have started work. We are trying to do whatever is possible within the laboratory premises. We've started doing some little experiments which can be just done within the lab with some of the tissues which were there, and hopefully we are trying to see if they're okay. But we do have to find out other ways, and here is where I would request our government and our funding agencies. We really hope that you are going to put in an extra effort for a more relaxed funding, because like when we put in projects, I mean, they are under strict invigilation. But we would hope that, like, considering that a lot of research, we have lost a lot of resources, we have lost a lot of time. We would like to continue with the research. Every single scientist all over India, I think, has to get back to their own research, their own scholars, and their own research problems. So we hope the government would take a more considerate outlook into this, and the funding agencies also would take into consideration what we have been, the backlog that we've been going through. And we hope we will get a lot of support from the government, from the funding agencies, and from each other. I think even like collaborations at this point may be a better way to go, because like, I think we should all share our resources as much as we can, so that we can help each other as to the best of our ability, so that ultimately we can make up for this lost time and make up for this immense loss that everyone has faced. And I'm sure we will overcome, and we are again, Indian science is again going to be back with a boom. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Chatterjee, for sharing your experience, especially in collection of the material or maintaining the cell lines in the lab, and also your request to the funding agencies for giving more fund for doing research, especially for purchasing the whatever chemicals, and even also maintaining the animals. So it was wonderful experience you have shared with us and the participants. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now I invite Professor Arun Jagannath, who was my colleague in Delhi University. Before joining as Vice Chancellor in Mansarovar Global University, I was serving University of Delhi in the Department of Botany. And Professor Arun Jagannath, we interacted with him, and I think while starting our a discussion on the topic, we first discussed that which topic should be selected, and we came to the conclusion that let us discuss about the problems of the research in the universities and in the institutions, because most of the institutions are facing a lot of problems related with research. Professor Arun Jagannath, is he
Yeah,
there?
good morning, sir. Thank you very much. I shall be basically talking about our own experiences at the Department of Botany and also my interactions with a lot of friends and colleagues and co-workers in India as well as abroad, and how they have actually taken steps to mitigate their losses and the procedures that they have followed to ensure that research in their laboratories does not get affected very badly. So, talking about this, I'd just like to start off with three different aspects of challenges that we have faced, primarily technical, administrative, and related to human resources. I'm just going to share the screen so that all of you can see it clearly. And so if you look at the technical challenges that we have largely faced in our own
Excuse me, sir.
department,
So,
being plant biologists and
Professor
also
Jagannath,
people, yeah,
Professor
yeah.
Jagannath, your screen is not being shared.
Oh, one second.
The green button.
Yeah, is it
Yeah,
visible now?
yeah. Now it's yeah. Please maximize it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we have a lot of people who are working on diverse areas related to plant biology. And one of the problems that I think all people have faced, whether in University of Delhi or outside, I've spoken to colleagues in other universities, both in NCR as well as outside NCR, a lot of plant material that was under culture conditions, they have completely lost the material. Experiments which were done over a period of 6 to 8 months to 1 year, we have completely lost all that. The other set of people who were doing projects related to seasonal crops, where the crop was standing in the field, uh, Seshasai also mentioned about it. They were severely impacted because collection of experimental material and data could not be done. One of the most important components, which I'm sure has affected many researchers in this area, is harvesting the seeds from the standing crops. Especially those who are working on annual crops, your research immediately goes back by 1 year without any questions asked. It immediately goes back by a year because you lose a complete generation. Colleagues who have been working on microbial cultures and collections, they have had huge problems related to maintenance of these cultures. Many of them have lost the cultures. And here I also wish to emphasize that many of these collections are derived from large-scale field visits all over the country. So these are microbial collections resourced from both within the country as well as abroad, and to lose them is an extremely devastating influence on their research programs. We have plants which are grown in growth rooms, growth chambers, which have all died because of lack of manpower, lack of facilities for maintenance, etc. A lot of us do molecular work. And as far as short-term experiments are concerned, one could say that yes, one can revive them once again and start them, but there are many which have been doing long-term experiments. There again, the impact has been very, very severe. There are a lot of colleagues in the department who also are field biologists. Dr. Vinita Gowda, I'm sure, will be talking about the issues that she has faced herself. So I will not stress too much upon this, but yes, the influence that it can have on researchers who were out in the field when the lockdown happened, who had to go to the field for collection of material, they have also been put back by at least 1 year. Another very, very significant effect that we have had is breakdown of equipment. You see, unlike many closed campus institutions, University of Delhi and many other universities across the country are open campuses where, as Urmi mentioned, people are actually residing outside the campus. They need to travel to their workplace. They do not stay on campus. So regular monitoring of the laboratory, of the infrastructure had become impossible for many people. Within our own group, we have had issues related to breakdown of -80s, wherein we lost a huge number of samples which have been collected and preserved for several years. Similarly, every other equipment which is very critical for maintenance of laboratories, air conditioners, temperature controllers, growth rooms and chambers, cold rooms, humidifiers, any one of them suffers a breakdown, you have years of work going down the drain. So these are some of the technical challenges that we have faced in our own institution and also outside. If you look at the administrative challenges, we can put them under two categories: projects which are operational and projects which are new. When we talk about operational projects, all of us have faced major issues with clearance of pending bills, payment of salaries for project personnel, because administrative sections could not function. As I said, no, many of them do not reside on campus. They have to come from outside. And because of these delays, there have been effects on remuneration, payment of remuneration to various project personnel. Utilization certificates, creation, vetting, and submission has got very badly affected, which in turn will also have an impact on release of grants by funding agencies. And of course, the delays that are caused due to routine documentation, approvals, purchases also add on to a significant delay in execution of the project work. If we talk about new projects, while efforts have been made by a lot of funding agencies to continue with review of project proposals and sanction and release of funds, the utilization becomes a big issue because establishment of committees, tendering, approvals, purchases, installations, deliveries, everything came to a standstill. And the biggest impact that this is going to have is on the project timelines or the milestones, which were envisaged during submission of the proposal. So these are some of the major administrative challenges which research institutions are facing. And finally, the third category, which is very, very important, is the impact on human resources. One of the worst affected people in this entire system or in this entire situation are the research scholars, because they foresee a significant delay in completion of their research programs. Many of them have not been able to get their fellowships on time, leading to huge monetary issues. Their accommodation status has got affected, and by regular counseling sessions that people have had, we have also been sensitized that many of them do come under severe mental stress. So these are problems which need solutions. We all know that they have happened and they need solutions. Another major issue is with postdoctoral fellows who come with their own research projects. Whatever happens with PIs for their research programs is also going to happen with postdoctoral fellows. At the same time, when we talk about early and mid-career faculty or scientists, as Urmi mentioned, the impact and the stress that it causes on them, because they, in many cases, would have to restart their entire research programs, which is not a simple thing to do. And the effects that this situation will have on the career prospects and growth of all these people is something which seriously need to be addressed. One more important point here is that because of movement of people away from their institutions, there has been a significant loss of trained manpower who were employed in research laboratories and research fields, etc. To overcome that, one would have to restart training people and get them back, which again is not a very easy task to do. So these were the three main challenges which I have been exposed to both personally as well as in my interactions with people. So what do we do? Where do we go from here? What is the way forward? If you look at the technical components, there has been a significant loss of time and effort. We cannot restore time, but we can partially compensate it by providing unconditional exemptions in timelines for both research scholars and postdoctoral fellows based on technical justification or certification by faculty, scientists, project investigators, supervisors, etc. We should ensure that research scholars do not come under the additional burden of following stringent timelines for submission of their PhD thesis, for for execution of the research programs within that time-bound manner, because they need to be given greater flexibility. And what can be done for the future is, this is something which I have gathered from my interactions with a lot of academics in Canada and the US and also some in Europe. Administrative systems, both governmental as well as institutional permissions, have to be in place for allowing movement of pre-identified research personnel as well as faculty for monitoring and maintenance of critical biological material or equipment, especially during exigencies, with full compliance of physical distancing norms. This is not something which is not doable. There are many universities in Canada and US which do that. The government agencies have given the freedom to the universities to decide that yes, you can allow research personnel to visit for regular maintenance and upkeep. You cannot initiate new experiments, but you can allow them to do. And interestingly, when Unlock 1 happened in India, uh, in Noida, where I reside, the district administration released guidelines for all universities that you are allowed to engage 30% of your workforce with physical distancing norms. So it was something which was done in a place as close to Delhi as Noida is, but universities were able to function. Critical equipment, critical faculty members were able to move into the campus and have a look. This is what were the guidelines issued. I have spoken to some of my friends working in universities here, and they have said that while some of them completely lost cultures which had to be regularly maintained during the 3-week lockdown period, but others were able to revive. So that is something which is not difficult to do. We need to decentralize the permission, and this needs to be recognized by the law enforcement agencies. And it is something which is very much doable. If you look at the administrative issues that we have faced, I think this period of 3.5 months that we have looked at tells us very clearly that it is time for us to go completely digital or online for all those procedures that involve routine administration of research projects at the institutional level. Digital signatures can become the new norm so that whatever can be achieved while the administrative staff is unable to come to their offices can be managed from home. This is very important because we do not know what is going to happen subsequently. We ourselves are facing this situation in the University of Delhi where section after section is opening and again closing, is opening and closing because someone or the other is getting infected with COVID, and therefore the department shuts down. People go into quarantine. So we have to have digital plans in place. It is very important for administration of research projects. Much of it has already been done in many government institutions all over the country. it is time for us to execute that for project administration also at the institutional level. We will have to bring about alteration in research project timelines to compensate for the loss of time. The timelines will have to be relooked at. And when we do that, the critical question comes up, what happens to here one classmates, how do we materials, etc., which have got lost because the minus 80 is konged off, minus 20 is konged off, and we have lost a lot of material because of that. The other is, if you're extending the timeline, the people who are going to be working, where do they get their salaries from? So is there a possibility that we could look at additional sanction for the manpower component of research projects for the extended duration of the research program with a review process if required? And finally, when we look at human resources, it is very important that there should be digital again or online documentation of fellowships and disbursement by the awarding institutions. If your finance section or your scholarship cell or your funding agency is unable to function for no fault of theirs, the people who are getting monetarily affected are the research scholars, many of whom stay away from homes, who need this monthly source of income to sustain themselves. Therefore, during the period of the lockdown, we have to be ready, we have to be prepared to ensure that there is direct disbursement into bank accounts based on signature of the research fellow and authentication by the supervisor. Again, here we have to go digital, that has to be the norm. A very important component here is that we have to have regular counseling sessions for students. There are many cases where not only students but even adults have come under depression, have come under mental health issues, and it is very important for those people, especially students who are staying away from their homes, to be regularly in touch with their supervisors or other faculty members. A very critical component again here is, if their work is going to be extended, many universities have already given a blanket extension of 6 months. Where are they going to get the money for that from? So that is another thing which we have to look at very critically. Is there a possibility of extension of the fellowship beyond 5 years for the affected students? And can there be a relaxation in timelines for submission of thesis? We have to ensure that these are the people who are our biggest and strongest workforce in the laboratories, and they need to be taken care of. It is very, very important. So these are the three components that I wish to talk about. I may have missed out many other components. There could be many other points which will come in through our discussion subsequently after all the panelists have spoken. So I'm looking forward to those, and we will definitely try to incorporate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Arun Jagannath, for raising many issues, and also you have provided solutions as well at the same time, that there are technical challenges, there are administrative challenges, and there are the problems which most of the research scholars are facing as far as their disbursement of fellowships are concerned, or even the problems being faced by the faculty members in pursuing research. And these are some of the issues. And thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. And these are the real issues. We all know, those who are working in the field or even in the lab. Even I know that many of the materials kept in minus 80 or minus 20, or even the cultures which are being maintained by the researchers, that may be lost, as Professor Urmi, Professor Dubey, and they have already mentioned about. And the crop problem which Professor Seshai has given. So thank you very much for giving us a detailed account of the real problems, issues, challenges, and also the solutions. Thank you very much. Now I invite Dr. Vinita Gowda for sharing her experience. Most of us are in the universities, but she is in a research institute. And research institutes have its own problems as far as research is concerned, or during the lockdown period, what happened to ICER or other institutions. She will share her experience. Vinita.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Pandey, and thank you all the other panelists. It's the good thing of being the last is that pretty much everything has been said by now by everyone. So all the points that I suspected this when I was preparing the slides, that pretty much everyone will cover the major important points. So I think I'm going to just focus on a couple of things, other than in the end I'll probably reiterate some things that Arun Sheshashai and Urmi and Professor Dubey and suggested during their sessions. But first of all, I'll just sort of go through the biodiversity part, which is what my concern is. Most of it is field work, which is what we do in the lab. And of course, there's a molecular component to it. I work mostly with plants and animals as an ecology and evolution and interaction studies. So I'll just walk you through first with what we saw in the first couple of months of pandemic and where we are now. So the first thing we saw in the first month of the pandemic, within 10 days, were images of these kinds. So while we were very scared and we were very skeptical of where the country was going, we had seen what was happening in Europe. We also saw these images, right? We saw that the Dhauladhar range was visible from Jalandhar. People were excited about it. We saw animals coming back from various. We started seeing these beautiful images from across the world, and even in India, this is an image from Bombay where we saw the flamingos nesting. So the first 3 weeks of the pandemic, despite all the inconveniences that people thought they were having, that is staying inside, which we were not used to up till now, having a slowed down life, which again we were not used to, there were some good things that we started seeing. And these images are important only from for especially for people who are studying ecology and evolution, and also people who are interested in climate change, but also people who live in cities and have never seen these kind of images before. So what do these pictures tell? They basically tell us that we have failed to share the space with animals, and then when it was allowed, the animals pretty much reclaimed it. Lockdown gave us an opportunity to look at baseline pollutions, especially in the case of metros. Now, when I say baseline, there was no way that anyone could have predicted that we will have a data for Delhi or Bombay or any metros where you can say that stop all the vehicular pollution, stop all the industrial, or minimize all the industrial pollution, and what would the air quality look like. So the lockdown gave us that opportunity to get back to this baseline data. We have also learned about the resilience of the environment. What by resilience we mean is that when you all of these images came within 14 days. That's so a very short period of time allowed the environment to change significantly. So it basically says the environment can actually jump back into something more positive if we make an effort. We also learned that we can survive with less consumption. No online shopping, no going to the shops every day, no parties, no anything. So I think it is sort of from a human perspective, it's also an important step for us to learn that we can survive with less, and we have survived with less. So these are all sort of interestingly some good things that came out. And in the case of metros, this is a very interesting image that I found online, which you can see the left side panel is what it was before, and the right is the image that you got after the air quality has improved due to the lockdown, or of course this is due to mostly the particulate matters have gone down. So there are many, the study came out of IIT Delhi, and you can see all the particulate matters have gone down, transport being the biggest sort of culprit here. When it was shut down, improved the air quality, etc. So these are all sort of some good things. The bad was, of course, we saw the migrant labor crisis, which is something that I would like to say, that while it was nice to see that, lockdown did affect us positively in terms of the environment, this is not clean air cannot be should be rejoiced, because this was at a very heavy cost of human suffering, and therefore both of these factors should be taken carefully. And now the question is, how can we bring both of these together? And being in an educational institution, how we can now add to this more complexity of how can we now have research going on, and how can we have the studies going on, that is in terms of the teaching. Now, COVID-19, from an ecological perspective, the first thing we saw was this scare we had from the bats, because that was one of the suspected animals from this happened. Now, these kind of transfers, we have a sort of a chain of how interspecies transmissions have occurred. Have that, and this graph is very, very commonly known by most people now because of the intensity of this particular disease. However, or transfer from animals to human beings is not new. In fact, that is something that I'm finding it to be missing in most conversations, that these have happened and have been happening for a very, very long time. And the reason I want to emphasize this is because we want to proceed with caution in terms of how we deal with this pandemic. We also should realize that this is not the only pandemic, and this is not the only disease that is being transmitted by animals. So therefore, not to want to downplay it, but I think it's important to realize that we cannot stop our research life or our general life. We want to change it. We may want to adapt to the new system, but stopping what we have been doing is not entirely is not sort of a solution for the current pandemic. So as you can see, the Lyme disease is known, and it's one of the major diseases in North America, which is transferred by the black-leg tick. The jungle yellow fever is specifically transferred by the howler monkeys, which are above canopy animals. And so as the trees got, or as the forest got removed, or the deforestation increased, the rate increased, the howler monkeys came down, and as they came down, the mosquitoes came down, and then came the disease. So all of these links are connected, and the reason we know these links is because someone has done the research. So the research component cannot be underplayed in terms of when any new disease or new pandemic or new emergency, for that matter, comes forward. So these are just sort of the different zoonotic diseases and the cycles that have come forth. And what's important for us to know is that there are several labs that have worked on these cycles, and there are different aspects of these zoonotic diseases that are now known. And it helps us to further mitigate any sort of an effect of these diseases and the pandemics that that may bring forward. And in most of these diseases, the pandemics have been predicted. So in some sort of ecological and environmental discussions of these, it is also important for us to understand, we are looking for sort of, the elixir for that will, sort of help in these diseases. The golden button to solve this problem, medicines. And of course, we are going to the plants first, because that's pretty much the origin of most medicinal sort of that we are using right now, even if they are later on synthetically developed. So medicines that originate from wildlife trade are something that is now being questioned, because wildlife trade is now being considered as one of the culprit of this pandemic disease. This also shows that wildlife trade convention has failed at various levels. And how animals carry diseases is something that we really don't know, because we've been specifically focused on more human diseases as opposed to the transfer of diseases from animals to human beings. This also sort of points out on how deforestation can protect us from pandemics. Many studies have shown the predicted models of what would be the situation if the forests were not removed, and if the animals were contained and were more sustained within that habitat. And some of these studies also are required because while we have the current pandemic, we don't know where the next one will come from. which means that we don't know where the next zoonosis will come from. We don't know where the next animal or plant-specific disease is going to be spread to the human population. So there are a lot of, what this pandemic has really exposed is how much less we know about our systems, especially our ecological systems, how about our environmental systems. And we've been focused on certain aspects of it, and we need to now branch out and look at the bigger picture, at a much faster rate. So one of the things is whether we are ready to learn from what we are calling now is this Anthropocene, that is the new geological era, which is so much marked by this human footprint that we have. So it's now predicted that the sixth major extinction is going to be caused by us. And just to give a general idea, this is what our last extinction, which was by meteors, and this is the next extinction, which is caused by us, by the kind of environmental impacts that we're doing. So, and just to put it in perspective, human being is just one species among 8.7 million species present on Earth. And what the reason this is important is, if we think this pandemic is the worst, I think we probably are sort of exaggerating in some sense the effect that other species can also have on us, and how we really need to therefore understand them. So this brings back to what everyone has been discussing in the panel. What can we do about it? So of course, the technical, the research aspects, Arun and Professor Shesha and Urmi and Professor Dubey already went into the detail. Yes, funds are required. Yes, students are also required. But from a perspective of science, we really need to also focus on educating the society that we have to reduce the consumption. And we also need to increase this contact that we have had in the first 1 month with wildlife. People had started taking photographs because they had nothing else better to do inside the house. And there is some good about it. That is, you've started observing the nature around you. You see what is the animal outside your house, etc. We need to discuss about this idea of the environmental policies now that we're going to follow. How do we protect the forest? What is the ministry doing about it? And development cannot be at the cost of our own lives at any point. So while we are destroying forests at one point, you cannot expect researchers simultaneously saying that everything is going to be fine. So I think this awareness is much more required right now. Interestingly, during the 3 months of lockdown, several environmental policies were changed. Several forests have been affected. So as a researcher, while I'm working in some of these field sites, I see the field sites being now open for industry or being opened up for mining. So these, and as a researcher sitting in Bhopal or in any place for that matter, we are incapable of doing anything. And this just puts us in a very difficult spot. There are PhD researchers happening, there are master's theses that were dependent on some of these sites. And it is not nice to be dealing with pandemic on one end and also seeing that your research site is also being destroyed. So it's sort of a very heavy position to be in this time. One of the other aspect that I could not put it in this slide, but I'll just go over it. What I have seen from what we are facing in ICER Bhopal, and also what I've heard from colleagues from other ICERs, is that we really need a long-term sort of institute-specific and country-specific protocol to deal with emergencies of this kind. And again, everyone else have pointed out, we need to basically assign individuals who are in charge of, let's say, the greenhouse facility, the shade house facility, the cell culture facilities. And these efforts were made after we went into lockdown, which shows how unprepared we were, despite the fact that the entire world was already going into pandemic. We were in the first country. So this shows the lag that we had and the sort of unpractical approach that we used in the first couple of months. Continuation of education and research should be emphasized irrespective of immediate needs. So, and it can be at a lower capacity, that it could be just 20% of the students are being taught, or 40%, and there could be some sort of a plan on how this is going to be implemented. But this complete shutdown of removal of students from the institute, complete shutdown of research is not a positive step at all. And it doesn't help the country that now we will not have enough research coming out in the next semester or in the next year, because now faculties and researchers have been sitting idle for the last 4 months. So I think one way that as scientists we can help is to contribute, and our contribution is science, is teaching, is research. So to take away that from us completely really puts us in a place where we want, researchers want to be part of the nation building process, but we are unable to do it because our labs are taken away from us. So I think there needs to be sort of a middle ground for this. And like someone mentioned, yes, assessment of projects by reviewers needs to be a little bit more relaxed, and also the timeline for the same. And students should be prioritized, especially because our research is run mainly by students and the research community. And the research community here is JRFs, SRFs, postdocs, and the technicians. And in some sort of rotational basis, every institute should come up with an idea of how they're going to deal with this in the next coming years. And the reason these emergency requirements should be made is it could be something like what Urmi said, that even if you have a cyclone, these SOPs should come into a picture and we should start utilizing it. So there are, I think the positive step is to take this, learn from this, and immediately implement it again, institute specific and nation specific, because our ICERs, for instance, are mostly what I call as gated universities. We have a compound, we can lock it completely, and we can work inside, as opposed to what Urmi and said for Calcutta, and what Arun faces in Delhi, which are like non-gated compound, sort of universities. That is, you're open, access to labs is much more easier than for us, and therefore you have a different sort of sets of issues in terms of contact, as opposed to us, where we are able to sort of close the gates and then say, well, those inside can never leave, and so on and so forth. So I think it's good to have these kind of conversations like what we are having right now, to come up with ideas from each other. And I think that's what is primarily very important, is to start the conversation seriously about it. So with this, I thank Professor Arun and everyone for your thoughts and for making it easy for me, because pretty much everyone else before me had summarized the points very well.
Thank you, Vinita, for excellent presentation. And you have given the idea that the strategy should be specific to the institutions and also at the institution level, because it will vary from institution to institution, and also at the national level. You had given the idea that in future there may be some problems like COVID-19 pandemic, and we should be ready for all those problems which may come in future, and especially with the field studies, and the research scholars should be given priority as far as the funding is concerned, or all facilities to be provided to them. Thank you very much, Vinita, for the excellent presentation. Now we may have some questions about the panelists, and let us have. There is one question by Bhavana Pathak. She has mentioned that how we can cope up with the MSc dissertation during the particular semester, and whether the students can submit secondary data for the MSc dissertation, because they were not able to do the research during the lockdown period. So this, Vinita, can you?
Yeah, so what we have done for master's students is we have allowed them, luckily in most labs, not all, students had already started their thesis work, and that's when we went into lockdown. So they have at least one semester of some data already, and so so let's say the semester started in August. So from August to December or January or till February, in fact, they have data. So but of course, what has happened is that the most critical, important, big experiment was left to the last, either because of the sequence of how the experiment was designed. So what most faculties have done is either converted that last bit into a larger review part for the thesis, so that you still have, the student has already invested in the project, and by now the student has already studied. So instead of focusing too much on the data and the analysis, I think it would be good if the PI can actually focus now on the review aspect, and give more weightage to that, such that the thesis looks complete. And like what Urmi said, the quality of the thesis is going to suffer. This everyone knows. ISC has said that, ICERs have said that, IITs have said that. So I don't think it's okay to now get hung up on the quality of the thesis, because our problems are much bigger than that. So I think it is okay if the student just presents what was done in the first semester, and for the next semester we are planning that again, most of the thesis may be review based rather than actual experimentation.
Thank you, Vinita. Himanshu?
Yes, sir.
Is there any questions from the audience?
Mr. Deep.
There's one more question from Lata Narayanan saying, for college undergraduate students, how do we manage laboratory sessions?
Yeah. So for college students, I think Professor Urmi can reply to this.
Sure. What's the question?
From Lata Narayanan, that for college undergraduates, how do we manage lab sessions? Now, we know that organizing practical classes is difficult. So what should be done for the college undergraduates?
So in fact, I would actually just like to add to what even Vinita said before I answer this question. Vinita, you're right. We are not, I'm not saying that we are actually hung up on the quality of the dissertations. The problem is we have all told them, focus on reviews. So whatever little you've done, if you've got that, if you can just add that. But most of, we have a lot of undergraduate colleges who are affiliated to Calcutta University, and most of them couldn't even start their research, because they have to go to different places and do it, because a lot of colleges don't have the facility to, conduct a good research problem. So we are focusing on, reviews, and that's how we go about it. But my worry was, these students, they themselves are worried that they really haven't achieved the hands-on experience that they would have loved to. So when they go and join a lab, they will be somewhat, they are scared that they would be somewhat behind, other students. So that's the only concern. However, said and done, we have to, be considerate and deal with it. And coming back to this question of dissertations as raised by Lata, practical examinations are at the moment out of the question. We cannot hold it because of the enormous population of students that we have. So what I think you already know that the MHRD, UGC have given us a criteria of 80-20, where 20% is internal assessment, which the college sends their marks in, depending on, the performance of the student during the entire year. So if the person has been coming in regularly, if they have submitted their, lab copies, and how well. And in addition to that, there was another discussion where we could have Viva sessions. So we could have Viva VOCI for these students. We could question them on what they've learned. Maybe they don't have to dissect a cockroach, but they can at least tell us some things which are related. And, based on that, we send in the 20% marks. So, and the rest 80% goes from the first year or the second year or the third year marks that they've already have. So that's going to be the rest 80%. So we would like them to submit dissertations in the form of PDF files, and we will have Viva sessions so that, we can at least have some interaction, because we cannot just give them marks without some kind of interaction. So at this point, I think online Viva in the presence of external examiners would be the best way to go.
Thank you, Professor Urmi. Now there is a question for Professor Arun Jagannath.
So can I just add one
Yeah.
or two comments based on the questions that were asked previously?
Yeah, sure.
So one of the concerns raised by an MSc dissertation student was that how do we improve the quality of the dissertation? That person is not feeling very comfortable. I just want to tell that person that, look, not all MSc students do wet lab dissertations all over the country. Many of them do reviews, and many of them get brilliantly placed even with theoretical or review-based dissertation. So it is not something that you should view as a negative impact on your long-term career profile. It's just a stepping stone. You'll soon overcome this part too. It's not such a big problem. And regarding Dr. Lata's question that was largely related to conduct of practicals for undergraduate students, I don't think it was related to examinations alone, but also practical classes once the session starts. That is something which will require a lot more brainstorming, and it is largely related to the field of education. So probably we should take it up later towards the end if we have the time and get in ideas from all the panelists and other people who are attending the talk.
If I can add a point on this.
There is one question for Professor Sheshai.
Yes, sir. No, but,
yeah. You want to add something, but there is a question for you as well.
I will take that also, sir. But then I thought this particular point of conduct of practical classes for the undergraduate students is an important thing. That is what I was also thinking, that one of the major things that we need to do is to sort of to develop some mechanisms where the practicals can be done by the students themselves at home. For example, if, when you look at the agricultural research, agriculture science, agricultural education for the undergraduate students, it is very difficult for me to tell them, this is how you do the chlorophyll, that is how you measure the chromosome, this is what the genetics that you should do. It becomes just impossible. But we can still be able to do some of those simple things which will keep their energy going. I would believe that this situation is going to disappear soon than late, I hope. That is what the major thing is. But with that hope, if you now look at mechanisms which would therefore make the children or the students to sustain their energy in science, we need to identify some experiments which they can do it themselves. We were thinking of some of those. For example, in agriculture students, most of them are from villages, and then they have their farms. That's what I was saying. When we can ask them to grow some whatever crop that their parents are growing in their fields, but then ask them to put X amount of fertilizers, X plus something, X plus 2. Just to sort of make them to feel that they do their experiment and show and find out by themselves that if you added these things, things will change. Put only FIM and see what happens. Compare between, the organic and inorganic and kind of things. What happens to the insect pests? What kind of pathogens come? Let them do it themselves. We need to sort of brainstorm. I'm telling straight out of the hat just now. But then if you look at some brainstorm, as Arun was saying, and I think what Rita said was very, very sensible in the sense, when we do these practical classes or practical mechanisms of understanding the science, they can do it at their own places. It will be wonderful to do that. And we need to develop modules so that the students can be told what exactly has to be done. Otherwise, there will be chaos. So that is one point. Vinita has something to add.
What I wanted to add to this is that actually NPTEL, and there are other forums in the country, and we have this sort of online classes as well. So one of the thing we've been doing, or we have proposed in fact from ISER Bhopal through something called Creates, which focuses on, Professor Amber Jain is in charge of it, which focuses on online teaching, online dispersal of information, and so on and so forth. So the idea through and connecting that to NPTEL, the idea is that we will have modules, we'll have sort of classes which are practical, which are recorded, because not only are we facing, let's say, even if I gave an online talk, not every child or every student has enough sort of, what is it, bandwidth or internet connectivity. So there are, it's not even enough to say that we're going to have it online, because they don't have access to online. So it needs to be online, it needs to be recorded, it needs to be in a repository such that the student can go back. He can watch just 5 minutes every day, for instance, or 10 minutes every day. So the challenge is huge, but this practical part as well, like what you said, those who are in the cities, I feel like those kids should actually, like, there are many questions on internship and thesis and so on and so forth. I mean, all of those students should try to relocate and go to the nearest university, see if it is functional, and somehow convince those faculties there, saying, look, I had an internship in ICER Bhopal, but I can't travel to Bhopal, and I'm in Bangalore, so can I now do it here? And sort of, and somehow the collaboration needs to be bigger now, and needs to be more open. The second thing is exactly like what you said. If you're from a village, then definitely the field is right outside your house. And we need to start focusing on that you don't need a conventional wet lab the way we are used to. This is something that we need to adapt. So be innovative and do a new research. And so I think that that's just the way to go. We should break whatever conventional ideas we've had about science. It need not happen in white lab coats. It should need not happen in sort of sanitized environment. So I think we just need to innovate immensely, I think.
What is the question that they have for me, sir? Sir, you are muted.
Please unmute.
Some of the students, they want to know about the internship, because every summer, most of the students were going to other institutions, even to ICER or even to GKVK, or even coming to Delhi University or Calcutta University or even BHU. So they want to know how they can utilize the time, because the universities are closed and only online teaching is done, and the evaluation process is going on online in most of the cases. So how they can do the internship, especially in this July or in August, because summer the institutions may open in September onwards, and so even Arun also can share this.
Yeah, so in case there are students who have internships, summer internships as a mandatory component of their academic curriculum, whatever courses they may be doing, I'm sure the university can channelize those marks into other activities of the academic calendar as they are doing it for other courses and examinations. The other component is, if it is not a mandatory component of your academic curriculum, my sincere suggestion to all such students is, please do not get worried or overworked about missing it out this year. Opportunities will always come, and probably 10 years down the line, you wouldn't even look back at this with panic. You would say, okay, I wasn't able to do it, fine, it didn't make that big a difference or even a difference to my career at all, because we are in a transitory phase. So let us not assign too much importance to things which not everyone gets an opportunity to do, and therefore doesn't influence the careers in a long term.
Professor Sheshai?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I can add Arun is saying. I mean, I was seeing some of those things where the PhD students are getting depressed and how to manage that kind of things. Like anything that is known, like said that Urmi said, we all said vehement in telling that the whole world is going to the same phase. You don't have to really worry that you're not looking very beautiful. You are as beautiful as you were. But the question is, how is it that the faculty can sustain the enthusiasm of the young students? Is the question that is what is asked by someone. I would feel that we should be a little more compassionate about the whole thing. We don't have to really kill them if they have not done the third objective. Like most of the time, the last objective is the one that will be the one that is the most important one that will be at the end. And if that has come now, our university took this decision to bring back those students who are in that final stage to do the experiments. And unfortunately, at that time, again, there was a peak in the COVID cases. And then the government wanted us to give away some hostel space for the COVID care center. So there is some fear all the time. But therefore, what we are suggesting to the students is, and which I can always tell to others also, is that when we have a situation of this kind of a pandemic threat, we don't have to really kill them. And students need not be worried what's going to happen. I remember on a lighter vein, when I was doing my postdoc in Australia, I was told that you have to give me what you did in 1 year, at the end of the time. And I was worried. I was like, what did I do? I went and asked my friend, boy, what did I do? He asked me, how old are you? I was 30 years, I think, at that time. I said, what have you done in 30 years is not significant at all. What can you do in 1 year? So the truth of that is this particular 6 months will disappear. Please, like Arun was saying, when we sit back and look at the problem after 5 years, you may laugh at it and say, damn it, we were going through that pandemic and nothing happened. So nothing will happen. We don't have to worry too much about it. I think the faculty should also tell the students to be very focused. But when it comes to the theoretical aspect of the dissertation or the final thing that we do, I think it's a good idea to now think about it. But this is not just a review. This is what I was telling myself this, and then to think about mechanisms in the sense, if you were to review something like, for example, what happens to the environmental pollution or what happens to drought because of the changes and how the plants will survive and produce and things like that is something routine, and we have a large number of data on that already. But if you are doing some research, let's be innovative in this and then find out if there can be some strategy that can be developed which projects something novel. We don't have to be shy of this asking some question which may look stupid today, but it may become a wonderful theory tomorrow. So theoretical aspects must be encouraged, and but it should be sort of innovative in terms of something which is novel.
Thank you, Professor Sai. Now we are coming to the end of the program, but there is one or two questions. Dipesh?
Sir, Dipesh Karim Punkara want to ask question live.
Yeah.
Dipesh, please unmute. Mr. Dipesh?
Is he there?
Yes, he's there. He's there, sir. He messaged me. Mr. Dipesh, please unmute.
He's not able to.
Okay, some anonymous Galaxy M20 want to ask question. I'm allowing him.
Okay.
Mr. Please unmute. Galaxy M20, it's showing.
There is one more question. There are two questions.
There are many questions, but we cannot. It is not possible for us to take all the questions. Is Professor Dubey there?
I am here. Yeah.
Now there are some of the students. They wish to know that what about the extension of their PhD thesis submission, because if they have completed 5 years or 5.5 years, and during pandemic they are not able to complete their work, and still they may need 6 months or 1 year. So as an administrator and vice chancellor of the university, students wish to know about what will be their fate.
Of course, that has been mandate of UGC also and MHRD also, that during this lockdown period, we should be considerate enough to provide extension to them. And in our university, we have already given 6 months extension to them. But even then, they cannot submit. Then on case-to-case basis, it can be looked into.
Wow.
Thank you very much. So,
excuse me, sir. Dr. Vinita want to answer a question.
Yeah, sure.
Only if there is time. There was one person, I think there's Anshul Dhyani, who has written that ecological studies are based on collection of samples on seasonal basis. During this pandemic, we have lost 1 or 2 seasons of data. So how to cope with that? Anshul, there's really no way to cope up with that because time is lost and that is it. So the only way to do is really focus on seeing So focus more on the statistics and see how you can work around it. So there is no, and you're not only one. All of us have lost this seasonal data. The entire world has lost seasonal data. So if someone has it, they just got lucky or they were in the right spot at that time. So don't worry about this at all. But definitely that doesn't mean you should have a gap or you should redo the experiment. Just work it around using good statistics.
Thank you, Vinita. Even Arun Jagannath.
Sir, there were 2 points, one from Professor Anju Srivastava and another from Mr. Imran Mohammed, wherein they have said that how do we ensure that all the government agencies take note of these concerns? How do we bring them into the discussion so that they get sensitized about these issues? So what are the thoughts of you and Professor Dubey and other panelists?
Definitely, after the webinar is over, we will be developing a concept note about this, and then we will be submitting to the National Academy of Sciences also, because we are jointly organizing this webinar, and also to the funding agencies. So we will take care of all those aspects in consultation with the panelists. So, yeah.
I mean, there was just another question which Richa had addressed, that how do we take care of such a situation if it comes in future? I think this situation has really prepared us in many ways. I mean, it was a big learning lesson. Like, I think everyone's discussed, it was a huge learning lesson for us. I mean, you know, in terms of reducing consumerism, to preparing our minds to overcome such situations, like whether it's academic or research or even ourselves. I mean, if we haven't learned now, we'll never learn. So maybe we should, you know, think of these, keep it in our mind, and always have a backup plan for any situation. I think that's the best way we can go forward. I mean, we should always have backup plans. Just like we do for our computers, we always back up our data onto hard drives. We should do that with our, you know, everything that's on our mind too, I think. So maybe that'll help.
And also, I think, just to add to what Urmi said, I think there's a very thin line. We have to, between panicking versus, and also like continuing to do, you know, and doing it very cautiously. We've got to move forward. We cannot stop working, you know, because this is what we've been trained to do. But at the same time, we cannot, you know, be too casual about it and move around everywhere, not wear masks. I mean, those general precautions need to be taken. So,
yeah, social distancing is important, and we have to take care of us and others as well. So we are coming to the end of this webinar. This webinar was organized, as I mentioned earlier, by the it was a joint venture of the Mansarovar Global University and the National Academy of Sciences India, and it was a very, very interactive session, and the panelists, or distinguished panelists, shared their experiences and how there were many issues, challenges, and solutions also they have suggested. Definitely we will be compiling all those things and submitting to the funding agency. Especially I'm thankful to the Professor Madam Manju Sharma, who is former secretary of the Department of Biotechnology and distinguished women scientist chair, National Academy of Sciences India, for her encouragement. All the time she encourages to organize seminars, symposium, and workshops. And at the end, on behalf of the Chancellor of Mansarovar Global University, Sri K.K. Tiwari ji, and Pro-Chancellor Engineer Gaurav Tiwari ji, and my own behalf, I extend hearty thanks to all the panelists, Professor R.S. Dubey, Professor M.S. Seshai, Professor Urmi Chatterjee, Professor Arun Jagannath, Dr. Vinita Gowda, for sparing their valuable time for joining us in this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.